We'd love to hear from you. Please do add into the chat as you go. And just to say, you're very welcome to turn your camera on. We are recording, so if you don't want to be on film, then please leave it off. But it is always nice to see people's faces if you want to do that with us. And if you need closed captions, we've got captions enabled. So if you go to the bottom of your screen and you'll see the CC icon, and you can put on the captions there if you would like to do that. This is nice. We're in Coventry, secondary school librarian, who also organises reading retreats. Well, that sounds very exciting. Might need to look you up. Come on a reading retreat. We've got Scotland, Falkirk in Scotland. Nice to see you. Oh wow, Stornoway, Isle of Lewis. Gosh, you are far north. We have a reading for empathy section in our school. That's very nice to hear. Excellent. Lovely. Do keep adding your places where you are and your reasons for being here, or your interest for being here, as we go. And we'll just wait a moment just to see if anybody else wants to join us before we kick off the session. Who else have we got here? Ah, thank you, Catherine. I will follow you on Instagram. Come to one of your retreats. Nice. And our speakers are across the world, in fact, today. So I'm in the north of England, in Rotherham. We've got Rebecca, who's in Sussex. We've got Anthony, who's in England, and Shana is being very glamorous and coming to us live from her boat in Rotterdam. So we are very lucky to have a wide geographical spread of everyone. We've got Berkshire. Oh, we've got some, yeah, read for their mental health and wellbeing. Lovely to hear. Great. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. I think what we'll do is we'll crack on so that we can make sure that we try to stick to time. First of all, it's really lovely to have you all with us. I'm Imogen. I'm from EmpathyLab, and this webinar is part of the Empathy Day Festival, which is a free 10-day celebration of the empathy building power of books. And we're inviting everyone to jump into someone else's story through creative activities, digital events with brilliant authors and illustrators, and 3 webinars like tonight designed to open up conversation on topical empathy themes. So tonight is our focus is on well-being and reading, and I'm delighted to have 3 fantastic experts with us to share their thoughts. 2 of whom also happen to be brilliant children's authors as well, so that's great to have their double hats with us tonight. So first of all, we've got Rebecca Kirkbride, who is clinical director from Place2Be. Place2Be is a nationwide children's mental health charity that specialises in a whole school approach to supporting children and young people's mental health and well-being. We have Anthony Kessel, who is National Deputy Medical Director for NHS England. And in his spare time, I mean, who knows that he's ever got any, he also writes the award-winning Don't Doubt the Rainbow fiction series for younger teens, which interweaves support for mental health into the narrative. And that's focused on understanding how our mind and our psychological system works. And we also have with us Shana Jackson, who is an award-winning author of middle grade fiction and an arts leader. She's had roles at Tate, BAFTA, Sheffield Doc Fest, and is curator of Ensemble, which is part of the London Games Festival. Shana has a particular interest in supporting young people to thrive through arts and culture, and especially those who don't think that it's for them. So it's great to have you all with us with your amazing range of knowledge and expertise and different areas that you work in. As we get started, I just think it's useful to kind of open up the context of young people's well-being at the moment. The stats around young people's mental health and well-being are pretty bleak right now. The NHS report 1 in 5 young people as young as 8 are dealing with mental health challenges. There are 420,000 children and young people every month being treated for mental health problems, with many more still on very long waiting lists. And 74% of teachers believe that poor mental health is negatively impacting young people's ability to learn. So, Anthony, if I can turn to you first, is the picture as bleak as it sounds? Is that the reality? And if so, what are some of the causes?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Imogen. It's great to be here today. Um, it is as challenging as you say. The figures I find staggering. Certain parts of the data really stick out to me. So there are elements such as 75% approximately of mental health disorders have shown themselves by the age of 24. And that's incredible. So if you think about it, if you're an adult who's going to have a mental health disorder, it's most likely that it's shown up in childhood already. That's staggering, but I'll also say I'll come on to say why it's a great opportunity. The figures for children are really, they are stark, Imogen. I think it's actually more stark than you said. The NHS 2023, the latest NHS digital figures, have it's around 20% or just under 20% in 8 to 10-year-olds that young have a common mental health disorder. It's about a quarter of 11 to 16-year-olds. And at that age group, it's actually boys slightly more than girls. But when you get to 17 to 19 and 20 to 25-year-olds, it's almost a third, and it's girls quite a bit more than boys. So in the age group we're sort of talking about today, it's a quarter to a third have a mental health disorder. And we know that there's a huge treatment gap. In other words, that the demand is there, but the services sadly, aren't able to provide for that. Um, what are the reasons behind that? I think that's the second part of your question. Um, I think, first of all, it's a real issue. It's not a question of overdiagnosis or anything like that. I mean, sometimes you get that coming up as a sort of, there's some kind of trend towards something. It's a real issue. So there is a lot of mental ill health out there in the world. It could be that certain issues, such as the pandemic, social media, have probably amplified things and brought things out into the open. But it doesn't mean the need wasn't there. It was always there. The prevalence was there. It's very, very high. We also know that there's a really strong association between neurodevelopmental disorders, so neurodivergence. So if you have dyslexia or ADHD or autistic spectrum disorder, you have a much higher risk of having a common mental health disorder, anxiety, depression, and so forth. So again, 6% of the population in this country, we believe that's the prevalence of neurodevelopmental disorders. Only 1 to 2% of the population have been diagnosed so far. So there's a big gap in people not coming for treatment. We have fantastic treatments for that. If anyone hasn't seen the BBC show Inside Our ADHD, and there's also one on autistic minds with Chris Packham. It's really fantastic and raising awareness. It's on BBC iPlayer. Now, I've done a little hunt for BBC there, but it's really very, very good. So it really is. It's a real problem. And why is there an opportunity? I said at the beginning, because if we can intervene early, the benefit isn't just for children, and the benefit is for the whole of their adult lives. So the fact that mental health disorders show themselves early, well, it's worrying and problematic, but it's also a fantastic opportunity in terms of prevention and intervention. So, and we'll come back, I'm sure, to talk more about that, because that, for me, is where reading and literature has a great place.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. That's worrying, but feels like there's a glimmer of hope there as well. So, Rebecca, from
Mm.
your perspective in Place2Be, as an organisation working directly with schools, what do you understand are some of the causes around those statistics?
Yeah, I mean, just before I get to that, and thank you for having me and for doing this with us at Place2Be. It's amazing. So just to speak to what Anthony was just saying about early intervention, which is a huge part of our mission at Place2Be, that no child should have to experience a mental health issue alone. But also that early intervention is the way forward. And some work that we did with an organisation called Pro Bono Economics back in 2023, they did an analysis of our data, and they said that for every £1 that's spent on early intervention, there's an £8 return for the whole of the country's economy. So it's absolutely worth that investment in early intervention. But again, I mean, I absolutely agree with everything that Anthony has said. That's very much how we understand things and see them as an organisation. We are working at Place2Be. You know, Place2Be, we are a national organisation. We're in around 650 schools across England, Wales, and Scotland, and we know that 34% of the pupils that we work with are eligible for pupil premium in the schools that we work with, compared with about 21% nationally. And those factors around poverty, around poor parental mental health as well, that those correlate with poor mental health outcomes as well. And I think what we're hearing, I mean, obviously we are, you know, we have the whole school approach, and we work alongside teachers and school staff. We are embedded in the school culture. We train teachers to be children's mental health champions. And I think one of the things that we're hearing more and more is about dysregulation in the classroom, children really struggling emotionally and psychologically to be in a place where they can access learning. And I think we'll kind of talk a bit more later on about the role that reading has to play around that. And I think, again, kind of picking up on something that Anthony said, I absolutely agree that the need has been there. I also think that lives are becoming more complex, and there are kind of vectors that intersect that create a perfect storm of challenge in children and young people's lives. I think a lot of people might have come across the work of social psychologist Jonathan Haidt and his most recent book, The Anxiety Generation, where he really looks at not just social media, but screens and digital technology and their impact on everybody born after 1995, basically, and kind of looks at them as a group, and really has the kind of data that he's producing, I think, tells a very stark story about the impact of that on children and young people. So yeah, I think things are complex. Social media is complex. There is a lot of anxiety about who am I in the world, and also the world is quite a scary place for adults at the moment as well. We've got a lot of global conflict. We've got climate anxiety. So in some respects, it's a kind of a sane response to have this sort of mental health issues, because yeah, it's a challenging environment that we're expecting children to grow up in and move forward into adulthood.
Thanks, Rebecca. Charlotte, I can see you nodding away. I'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of why aren't children thriving right now? Is it that sane response, do you think?
It is. Of course, I'm not like Rebecca or Anthony. I'm not a professional in mental health, but from what I'm seeing, you know, the world is on fire. We're, you know, on the brink of ecological collapse. You can live stream war atrocities to your phone while you're in bed. AI is threatening to take their jobs. Of course, they are under pressure. The pandemic, everything feels futile. So I'm completely empathetic to them. I feel quite the same. So in relation to arts, what is why aren't people thriving in the arts? The ever-present problem with arts is access. So arts is increasingly maligned in formal educational settings. It's seen as something that's a bit frivolous, or, you know, why are you making pots? Why are you watching the television? It's like, okay, no, that's not what it is. And then outside of a formal educational context, it can be quite a hard sell to young people to perhaps go to a gallery, a library, a museum when their free time diet, let's say, is already filled with other things that also include doom scrolling. So it's a really hard cycle to break yourself out of. Yeah, it goes back to access, but interestingly, the arts organisations across the UK and beyond are doing lots and lots of work for children and young people. I mean, for me, the point of an art gallery or an art space is for respite, but also for visitors to see responses to what's happening in the world. And it would be fantastic for young people to engage with these services, but arts organizations have to, well, they have to work harder to attract the children and young people. It's very difficult, and there has to be a fostering and appreciation of what the arts can do. We need to sell that to the young people. They need to understand what the benefits are, but while also not suggesting it's a panacea and it's going to solve all their problems. But it can be a space where they can explore some of the feelings that they are feeling in a safe space.
Yeah, fantastic. And yeah, I think that the arts generally in terms of storytelling in all sorts of different forms and genres, I think is a kind of, really interesting conversation to add into this in terms of not just reading, but stories in all their forms. But I am going to pull us back into think now that we've kind of looked at that context to think maybe a little bit more positively, as we've hinted that there might be some light in this. So let's think about what we can do in terms of working with stories through reading to make a difference. So at EmpathyLab, when we work with schools, we encourage them to embed reading for empathy practices into their school curriculum, into their culture, the whole culture of the school. And what we find is that schools report that children are calmer and less stressed, that there's greater social cohesion within classes, that they're able to identify their own emotions, the emotions of others, share those emotions, and therefore better self-regulate. And that leads to a greater sense of belonging and helping children settle to learn. So, Rebecca, from your experience, what do you think stories and reading bring to this? Can they be an effective tool in supporting well-being? Is our evidence backed up by what you're seeing? And does Place2Be harness stories in work with schools?
Yes, yes, and yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think as a child and adolescent therapist myself, we know that one of the most effective ways of helping children process trauma or work through difficulties is through metaphor, through creative methods, through art, through reading, through anything that allows them to contact through play with that metaphor. And that way, we can connect with children in a way that feels safe and helps to build trust. It isn't just directly saying, tell me what happened, or tell me, it's kind of engaging in a playful way through metaphor. And then we can safely explore and express emotions and create opportunities to form a new framing, a new picture of that experience. And reading is really important. So, when we've got two authors here who create wonderful characters, and of course, as you read those, you project your own experience onto those characters, and you can play around with different ways of exploring and different ways of navigating various various life situations. And that way we're exploring that child's inner world safely. We're not going to re-traumatize in the way that, really remembering or being asked directly about those experiences could initially. Very frequently it's a way into then having, then you kind of build that relationship safely, and then you can have those more direct kind of conversations. Books and stories are a wonderful way of doing that kind of therapeutic work. And also, it's interesting because my first degree is in English literature. I grew up, I've been reading forever. Everything for me is books, and I guess thinking about this really really made me go back to recognizing that books are such a great tool in terms of the plasticity of characters. You can create whoever you want just with your imagination, with pen, with paper. And that means that all children can be represented in the literature, in the fiction that they engage with. And that means that they can find their story. And what you were saying just now about belonging, Imogen, I think, when you see yourself, your identity, your family dynamic, your quirk, your way of understanding yourself is suddenly there in that book. Or you can create your own story. You can create your own book. Again, I think that is really, really powerful. And then just quickly, the last bit that I've got, like, honestly, I could talk forever about this, but the last bit I wanted to add is about that regulation and what we know about the experience of being read to, the soothing, calming, the way that children can really feel connected with relationally. And that is massively important. And we also do a group intervention called Journey of Hope that was developed by Save the Children as a response to Hurricane Katrina. It's been going a really long time, and that is all based on story. So every week, the first thing the children do is sit down and read a book together, and then they move into the therapeutic group session. So it's so varied and diverse and so powerful. So yes.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because actually we had a webinar last night, which was with World Book Day, and Professor Teresa Kremen was talking about this, how books are a social experience, that sharing of stories and the conversation that goes with it is actually how empathy and that kind of social cohesion starts to work, because you are hearing somebody else's story, recognizing your own perspective or someone else's perspective in that, and sort of building up your bank of understanding from that. Brilliant, thank you. Shana, could you share your thoughts on how stories support well-being, and particularly thinking about how that might work for young people who find it harder to engage with reading?
Absolutely. So everything that Rebecca said, plus 100%. Exactly. Like, books open up your world. They're cathartic. You can see yourself, you can see others, you can, play out scenarios that you might be interested in thinking about. They're amazing. And yeah, they're a safe way to explore feelings and emotions. In terms of young people who are finding it difficult, I think there are a number of ways, some of them more unorthodox than others, but there are fantastic books for slightly older children who don't like to read or feel that their reading level is not as high as their peers. Sometimes you get handed a book and it's dense and it's full of words and you're just like, I can't. Barrington Stoke do excellent books that are high level conceptually, but with a design and a reading level that's slightly lower. So those books are absolutely fantastic. We need to, I think, as publishers, as teachers, as librarians, it's very difficult though. We need to try and break books out of their age banding a little bit. So there's no shame in picking up a picture book if you're 15, if that's what you need. Or, actually I'm 8, but I'm a bit of a prodigy, so I'm going to read this YA and check in with my mum first to see if the content's right. That kind of mixing of levels would go miles in helping us understand each other. And then this one is a bit unorthodox. I write games, and I love games. I write narrative-based games, so I write mystery games and all kinds of things. And I'm seeing a lot of games get a bad rap, sometimes quite rightly. But there are some games where you can really explore empathy that I'm really enjoying. And I like the Story Museum in Oxford is about to open a narrative in games gallery there, So I'm seeing some more like support for this idea, but maybe there are some narrative games for those really reluctant readers to start with, and then that might springboard into literature, hopefully. But yeah, I think my key thing is breaking down these barriers and saying, this is a book for a 9-year-old, and this is a book, like, let's just calm down and let everybody enjoy what they want.
Yeah, well, very well said, I think, and I think particularly picture books are so amazing. Like there's such riches to be found within picture books. Any topic that you want to discuss, any issue, there is a picture book for it, and they're so often multi-layered and so brilliant at really getting to the heart of the subject very quickly. So we always advocate for picture books being used at any age, and we're big fans of Barrington Stoke. They're one of our builder publishers, and we love their books. And it's so interesting, isn't it, the games idea, because that's the kind of ultimate perspective taking, isn't it? You are stepping into that character's viewpoint, and so yeah, it's a great way of literally kind of diving into their story. That's really interesting. I love the Story Museum in Oxford. I need to pop along and see that exhibition. So Anthony, can we pick up with you in terms of sticking with the idea of reading? And you mentioned earlier about it being a kind of possible preventative tool. Could you expand a bit on that, about how that preventative thing might work through stories and literature?
Sure. Well, first of all, brilliant points from both Rebecca and Shana, and coming at this from a slightly different angle. What I'd say is this. There is a misunderstanding out there in children and adults about how the psychological system works. And I think this is especially prevalent in Western societies, about the relationships between our thoughts and our feelings. It looks to us, and I will come on to why this is relevant for the preventive issue in a second, but I have to just go through this first. It looks to us as human beings very, very clearly as if our external circumstances are responsible for the way we feel, whether those feelings are positive ones, that's of joy and happiness, contentment, or negative ones, sadness, anxiety, depression. It looks as if the rain out there, a boss at work, an exam at school is directly responsible for our feelings. But that is not the case. In fact, it's biologically impossible. How does an external circumstance put a feeling inside you? It can't happen. It's the way you are thinking about that external circumstance that determines your feelings. And if I give an example, behind me here, I've got my blinds up, but it's raining outside. Now, the rain as an external circumstance, the rain's happening, I could be looking out that window, and if I'm thinking, wow, it's really depressing, it's always raining in May in London and I've just fed up with it, it's likely that I'm going to have a negative feeling about the rain, if that's how I'm thinking about the rain. On another occasion, it could be exactly the same rain on exactly the same day, and I could be looking at that rain and thinking, wow, isn't it magical how a droplet is coming down the window pane, and the refraction of the light, I can see all the different colors of the rainbow in that single droplet. And I could have quite a beautiful, positive feeling. So it's not the rain outside there, it's the way you're thinking about the rain. And the reason why that's important, that it's our thinking that determines our feelings, not our external circumstances, and especially for children and reading. Firstly, if you think it's your external circumstances that determine your feelings, which is not correct, then you put a huge amount of effort into trying to change control your external circumstance, which is virtually impossible to do, and is incorrect and going to be a little bit of a hiding to nothing anyway. If you understand that your thinking determines your feelings, then you are much more empowered and have much more agency to navigate the path of your feelings. And what I mean by that is, the reason why reading is helpful for children in terms of their mental health is how do you, if you're having a day when your thoughts, which determine your feelings, are running away with you and are quite negative, and you're feeling a bit bad, anxious, depressed, low mood, whatever it might be, how can you stop yourself feeling that way? Or how can you avoid it? Oh, it's by changing your thinking or your state of mind. How can that happen? Well, one of the ways, the easiest way we all experience is distraction. And one of the basic things that reading does, picking up a book, is it takes you out of that zone that you're in into a completely different space. And that distraction alone can be sufficient, at least temporarily, to change the way you're feeling. Now, on a much deeper and longer term level, how does that help? Well, you have to help educate children and also adults about these relationships between their thoughts and their feelings and how the psychological system, works, including thought recognition and picking up negative thoughts early, learning how to drop negative thoughts and so forth. But that's one really discrete way of how reading simply helps through the distraction and the calming nature. And in fact, as Shana was alluding to, it doesn't have to be reading. If you're playing a musical instrument or you're painting, they're all fantastic, not just for children, but for adults as well. Because A, they take you away from those other thoughts, so they're calming. And secondly, certainly painting and music, they're expressive. So you get in touch with your inner essence and that gets expressed outwardly. And that's hugely positive to human beings. So reading is really valuable. I spent the last 6 years, I think, as you know, Imogen, on the board of Book Trust, and we were very much promoting the value of reading for that reason alone. There are many, many, many other reasons. The other way preventatively, and we'll perhaps come on to this, is it possible to use, and this is what I've tried to do with my books, to use fiction even more proactively? So can you use fiction as a vehicle towards supporting psychological well-being in children and young adults? Not just as a distraction, becoming, but can you put tools, ways of understanding the psychological system in books to help children navigate life challenges more constructively and more gracefully? And that's something, yes, I think we'll probably come back to that I think is underexplored. I've been trying to do that with my books, as you know. And I think there's way more we could do in the publishing, literature, teaching world about having books that explore the psychological system carefully and provide tools for children that help them.
And yes, let's carry on and think a bit more about that in a moment. But because very cleverly what your books are doing is it's woven into the narrative, so it doesn't feel like a lesson in there. It feels like it's part of the character's experience. And certainly with the work that we do in EmpathyLab, is what we're always trying to delve into. So really focusing on the character, their experience of the world, their feelings, so that you can jump into that to start to unpick your own, imagine them, and consider yourself in relation to it. So, but
sorry to interrupt. Sorry, I was just going to say, you said earlier that Shana and I both, I think, write mystery books now, and I think we know why might that be the case? I can't speak for Shana; she'll tell you herself in a second. But one of the things that I've learned from being an author over the last decade or so is, children and young adults put books down quickly. So I use the genre of, my protagonist is a 13-year-old detective, Edie Marble, but I use the genre of detective fiction because it's exciting. So first and foremost, the reader has to get excited in the adventure. It's got to be a rollicking adventure. Otherwise, children will put books down, we know, quicker than adults do. So first and foremost, you've got to have something exciting. And then are you able, after you've engaged the reader, to be able to immerse and put other things in there that support what you're talking about?
Yeah, fantastic. And Edie Marble, I have to say, is the 13-year-old that I would have liked to have been. So I think certainly putting yourself into that character and sort of seeing the world through her eyes is a really great way of learning to understand how your brain works or how her brain works in that way. So Shauna, that's segued us very well into thinking a bit more
Mm.
about you two as authors. And I should just say to everybody listening, if you do have questions as you go along, please do put them into the chat and we'll spend a few minutes at the end answering anything that you have. Thank you for your comments as we're going. Please do keep them coming in, but also, yeah, add any questions that you have, any thoughts that you have, and we'll come to those at the end, towards the end of the session. But Shauna, so your books explore usually contemporary issues for younger readers. Do you consider how your books might impact on young people's empathy or on their social and emotional skills more broadly, and their well-being? Is that sort of part of the writing process for you? How do you think of it?
It 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 is. So I'm probably most known for High Rise Mystery, which came out in 2019, so it's an old one now. But the year before it came out, in 2018, there was a survey. There was the results from a survey. I'm not sure if it was Book Trust or National Literacy Trust. So I apologise in advance for that. But it said that only 1% of main characters in books published that year were black or brown children. You were more likely to see a stick or a dog as a main character of a book. And as I was coming up with the idea for High Rise Mystery, I was like, well, that's terrible. For me, as Rebecca was saying, as Anthony saying, when you see yourself or people like you in books, it's not good just for you, it's great for other people to see you being smart and funny and clever. So that was kind of CLP. Thank you, Kirsten. And it was really not inspirational per se, but an instigation for me to really get going on High Rise Mystery. So I do think a lot about who the characters are, where they're from. Of course, as a mystery story, it has the same codes and conventions as Sherlock Holmes. And when I go to school visits and I'm talking to kids about how they write their own stories, I say to them, you need to do the twist. Take the people, the plot, and the place, and twist it. Excuse me. And I use Sherlock Holmes as an example and turn it into High Rise Mystery. So I say, I love Sherlock Holmes and I love Watson. I think they're great. But what if, instead of being two posh, older white men, what if they were two young black sisters? Then we've got the characters. And instead of running around country estates, what would happen if it was a council estate? And instead of it being in 1890 or wherever, what if it was in 2010 or 2020? And then boom, you've got High Rise Mystery. And they're like, yeah. So I'm like, twist stories into what you want them to be. And so that's where I'm always coming from. And then in terms of the actual writing with High Rise Mysteries in particular, I was very strict to myself about short, punchy sentences. Like Anthony says, the genre is inherently exciting. So keeping up that energy, cliffhangers at the end of every chapter, come back, come back, come back. But then it's funny because as I've gone into my writing career, I got this is like therapy now, but I decided I wanted to write worthier books and longer books. So I do the mystery element's gone down a little bit. It's coming back. But I started moving more into exploring things like the Windrush. I can't talk today. The Windrush scandal, and single parent families due to parental infidelity and all kinds of things. I still wrap those in a mystery banner, but going a bit deeper and a bit longer. But I'm going back to this punchy text, and because children are really responding to it and they can really grasp it, like it, and keep coming back to it. So I'm not saying every book should be, not every book should be a short, punchy mystery, but they do a good job of hooking children in.
And I guess that hook means that you're reading on, you're reading more, and that in turn is just going to do its job of building those empathy muscles, helping that emotional development, social and emotional development. So just the more you can keep young people reading, and then the
Yeah,
more likely they are to read more and more widely as
yeah,
well.
absolutely. And I think it's also like a part of and the author's responsibility when we are with children and we go to schools is to not only promote our own books, but to promote books that children may also like. So if I go, I'm like, well, if you don't like murder but you still like mystery, why don't you try Serena Patel? Or if you want something historical, why don't you try Robin Stevens? Or if you want something like that that's football based. So I think we have a responsibility to keep, they might not like our book, and that's absolutely fine, but what else can we point them to? We always need to be opening that door for them.
Nice, lovely. Anthony, can I ask you about your writing process? How you're obviously thinking about how Edie Marble's mind is working as you're writing, but are you particularly thinking about how that might affect young people's empathy or their ability to develop their empathy as they're
I'll just
reading?
show them there. That's High Rise Mystery is a brilliant book. And I do remember that survey that Shana that you alluded to, because we were absolutely appalled at Book Trust. And you had a publisher who's hugely committed towards addressing that, which was really, really great. It answers that there are different ways that mental well-being are portrayed in books. So, for instance, the author Sita Brahmachari, who's fantastic, has written some amazing books that include When Shadows Fall, has people with mental health problems. And that's really, really important. People from different cultural backgrounds with mental health problems, and they're stunningly good books. What I've been interested in doing is trying to provide the tools for psychological well-being. That's rather different, but just as important in a different way, rather, to displaying and showing the experience of families and individuals with mental health problems. But what about the tools to support good mental health, prevents the issues surfacing in the first place? So in my books, what I've done through the vehicle of detective fiction is there are two ways that I've try to provide those tools. One is through the way that Edie navigates the challenges that she experiences in the books. So at places I explore her navigation of those challenges from a psychological perspective. In book one, for instance, her mother, the five clues, her mother dies a year before the book starts. And she finds out a year later that it wasn't the accidental death on the railway tracks, but actually her mum, a human rights investigator, was murdered. And that is for the story in the first book, is her trying to solve the murder of her mother. So there's a lot to think about there. So it's the way life challenges, because challenges are part of life for children and adults. And secondly, through providing specific tools. So I've used the vehicle of an education program about understanding your psychological system better, being taught in ED school. So I have to be very careful not to make it too didactic. I mean, so there are snapshots in the books, as you know, of little elements of I call it power. There's a program, POWAR, Principles of Wellbeing and Resilience, that it's taught in ED school, and there are little here and there snapshots of her attending that course that then provide the reader in an engaging way, her and her classmates having a bit of fun attending this course, learning something about the relationship between thoughts and feelings. As an example, we're learning something about the importance of attention and being focused on the present moment and not allowing yourself to time travel in your head, worrying about the past, worrying about the future, those kinds of things. So I think that's how I've approached it. And I think the publishing world, I don't know if we're getting on to the next question now, but I think there's a lot more. I feel like there's a lot more that the publishing world can do in this spirit, to be honest. Because I think we need more books like that are exploring, not just the books that are portraying mental health problems. That's good. There weren't many of those. Now there are some more, but many more that are providing, the language for children to read, learn, and understand, including around empathy, but built into exciting stories or engaging stories, at least. That's I think what needs to happen more.
Yeah, lovely. And yes, that sense of, I think, the challenge, everybody is going to face challenges, whether you're young or old. There's always
Absolutely.
challenge in life, but it is having within the book that kind of the kind of positive tool, the way not, that the book is opening up that ability to understand the positive way through, as well as just the issue itself.
Yeah, can I just come in and just say, I mean, I think one of the things that I think is very interesting in that respect is how books naturally map onto the therapeutic journey. Books very naturally present a problem, a conflict, a crisis, and a resolution, and there's creativity in that resolution. And I think what I hear, Anthony, is something about psychoeducative, but I've heard you say a couple of times about engaging the reader. And we know that no therapeutic intervention works until that relationship is in place between the therapist and the child or the young person. You can't do therapy at somebody. And so there's something fascinating there, isn't there, about the replication of that therapeutic connection, that relationship, when of course you can do psychoeducation, you can talk to children and young people about how feelings and thoughts work together, and all of that. So it's really sort of making me think a lot about that process of that it maps very clearly onto the therapeutic journey.
That's a great
And it
point. I hadn't thought of
reminded
it.
me.
Sorry, that's a great point. I hadn't thought of it like that. But
It's worth exploring, isn't it? I think in terms of the use of of how you're describing books. But you also reminded me that this is going back. I was in my mid-20s, so going back quite a long way. I read Train Spotting, and at one point the main character goes for therapy, and his therapist suggests he reads Carl Rogers on becoming a person. And I shot down to Waterstones in Brighton and bought a copy of On Becoming a Person. And then, though I didn't train, Carl Rogers was the founder of person-centered therapy, and I'm a Freudian, but it was a big step in me coming out of a very difficult time in my 20s and training as a therapist. So yeah, sometimes, I mean, you're talking about a very deliberate, don't think Irving Welsh planted that quite as deliberately in Train Spotting, but it's fascinating, isn't it, to think about those seeds and what they can do.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I think we've all had those moments with books, haven't we, that it's just sparked some amazing light bulb moments. So Becca, I'm going to stay with you for a minute just before we open up to any questions if people have them. But we've talked a little bit about what could change or what could be different, but particularly thinking about what reading and stories might bring to the solution. The government shared a couple of weeks ago now that there's to be new funding for additional mental health support in schools. Is that good? The good news that it's on the surface seems to be. What would you like to see happen?
Yes, I mean, we had a letter in the Guardian in response to this announcement, and I think, you know, overall great, really great to see more investment, hopefully in mental health specialists to work with children and young people. I think as an organisation, absolutely founded on the idea of the whole school approach and the richness of that and the impact not just on the children but on the systems around the children, and kind of really working, you know, in a really fully embedded way. Our concern is that even with this extra investment, that the spread of the mental health support teams, that they will just be spread too thin to really be embedded in that way. And also, I think the other thing that we're concerned about is what we call the missing middle. So those children whose difficulties are too serious for the low intensity work that brilliant work that the MHSTs do, but they also don't meet the thresholds for the ever lengthening waiting list for CAMS. And we, you know, our services, our therapeutic services, are delivered by qualified registered counsellors and psychotherapists, and I think therefore we really meet that need. So we very much feel that there needs to be flexibility in the model of mental health support offered to school, and that health systems engage with schools locally to understand what support is already in place and what more they need to help their pupils, so that we're not duplicating. Nobody has got the money or the time to duplicate anything, but we really want to make sure that children and young people are actually getting the service that they need, rather than the fear sometimes is that, you know, there can be a little bit of a, we've done that, we've ticked, we've done that, we've put some money into it. And I think, yeah, we just kind of want to keep that conversation going for as long as possible.
Lovely. And Shana, from your perspective as an arts leader, what needs to change from that point of view? How important is it that we prioritise social and emotional learning, including empathy development?
Yeah, well, it's absolutely imperative, and I'm of course going to agree with Rebecca. And my answer is we need money, but we need money because, of course, we need money. But I used to be the director of an art gallery in Sheffield, and you know, as you know, as libraries, the way the funding works is just not often fit for purpose, because I know that lots of librarians and museums and galleries have excellent provision, and it's just a matter of getting the audience to you and telling them about it. So what I would love to see is a strand of core funding for libraries and galleries and museums to develop their audiences, because I know the programs and the books and the work is already there. So that's what I need, but that's very lofty and impossible. So we need to think about short practical steps that we can do, and I think it's a matter of trying to go where the young people are and bring them in. So when I was at Site Gallery, we had a bus, and we'd go to their community centre, we'd go, come on then, jump in. Obviously we didn't kidnap these children, we'd get permission, and then we'd take them back to the gallery and show them what we could do, like what was there. We had young people's programs, the Society of Explorers, and it was just the continual breaking down of barriers. I know it's so difficult for adults sometimes to want to go in an art gallery. It feels so pretentious and snobby and not for you. So I can see why a young person would be like, absolutely not. So all of that work we need to do to break down the barriers, it is what we need to do, because the benefits are immense. And also, very quickly, I wanted to say to Rebecca's point, I didn't have the same effect with the same response to train spotting, but when I was 8, I read a book called The Runaways by Ruth Thomas, where these kids run away. They ended up living in Bristol, Brighton, and thinking about living on a boat. And I lived in Brighton, I almost moved to Bristol, and I live on a boat now. So that book absolutely was core to who I am. So thank you, Ruth Thomas.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. If anyone else wants to put their book that changed their life in the chat, then please do tell us how the impact it had on you. It's so interesting, that, isn't it, in terms of people having access, young people having access and being invited in and welcomed into those spaces. And I think changes in the curriculum needs to happen for that to happen. There's got to be space within the school day, because not every family is going to do that. Not every family can. But if it's for true equitable access, it needs to be happening in schools, but that means space in the curriculum to do it and to enjoy those arts and cultural 100%. Moments, whether that's a trip to the library, a trip to a museum, or to go and see a play and find a story in that way. Anthony, just round us up then with your double hat of the NHS and author. What would you like to see change? What might come from the government? What might come from the publishing industry?
3 things, Imogen, I'd like to see change. I'd like the Department of Education to pay more attention to the curriculum of the books that are taught in schools and are the subject of GCSEs. I'd like to see Shana's, if we're really serious about the mental health crisis, we need to be more imaginative about using fiction as a vehicle to mental health improvement. Why isn't, maybe Shana's books are being taught around the country. I don't know, but they should be. Why? If my books are introducing those tools, I don't make any money out of these, so it's not about that. Why would you not want those on the curriculum and being taught? But they're not going to do any harm, and they could do an awful lot of good, not just the reading and the distraction, but actually to improve children's mental health. So I'd like to see greater imagination of the Department of Education for the books that are mandated across schools in this country. And that's number one. Number two, more research. I work in health policy making, and I know that nothing gets these days, especially with no money around, nothing gets commissioned and put into practice unless there's some evidence around its benefits. So we need to do more research around, for instance, these books. I've spent the last 5 years going around schools, spoken all around this country and elsewhere to lots and lots of children who have told me about the benefits they've got and the pleasure from the books. But that's not enough. You need to do some research. It's not difficult to do the research. You could do research, you could do before and after. I am an academic. You could do before and after study of a few classes and see whether their psychological well-being status is improved after reading the book and if it's sustained at 6 months. If we could gather more evidence and create more evidence-based policy making like that, well, then that would be grist to the mill. I mean, if you can find fiction books that actually show well-being improvement, why would you not want them on the curriculum? So I think I'd love to work with Place2Be, perhaps, and yourselves, Imogen, we've spoken about this, to try and do more of that. And the third thing is I'd like to see, this is to the publishers really, non-fiction on psychological well-being. They're just for children and young adults. I know there's a plethora of stuff out there, but it really addresses a lot of the surface. If you've already got anxiety and OCD and eating disorder, depression, what do you do? What we're trying to do preventatively is saying, what are the tools for psychological well-being? So you have to start by understanding how the system works and so forth. And it's psycho-spiritualism in its own way. And I'd like to see more of that in a creative, imaginative way. We need to get the likes of Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and people working with, with Rebecca, with Shana, with book that cleverly and creatively provides tools for psychological well-being preventatively, not just those that tell you where to go and how to address things. They're important as well once you've got the problem already.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're voting for Anthony for Prime Minister next. But if there are any questions, then please do put them into the chat. But as that is happening, I'm just going to share my screen again and alert you to a couple of things that are coming up. So the first one is a very special gift from Anthony's publisher. They have 3 sets of the award-winning Don't Doubt the Rainbow series as it is so far. I think there is a 4th one coming out shortly. So if you would like to be in with a chance of being gifted one of those sets, please can you email that is on the screen now and to tell them how you'd benefit from the books in as short a sentence as possible. So that will be going out to everyone that registered for this. So it'll come to you in an email, but if you can, whilst you've got it on the screen there and you'd like to win those books, then please do drop them a line. They've very kindly given us those books as a giveaway. But also, whilst we were talking about the things that we'd like to change, if you are interested in that, you might be interested in this. So the 27th of November, we have a conference, Raising Generation Empathy, in collaboration with the University of Sussex. We've been working with the University of Sussex for many years now. Professor Robin Banerjee is the researcher there who is particularly interested in reading and empathy. And they're going to be presenting some new research about how reading does build empathy for young readers. But we're also using that as an opportunity to hear from people practicing this in classrooms, in libraries, in community settings, about how this works, how reading for empathy can be a real preventative tool like we're talking about today, and how it can be embedded to support young people and to help them to thrive their social and emotional development to be developed further. So if you are interested in hearing more like the conversation today, Anthony is going to be speaking at that conference along with many other excellent experts. So you can now buy early bird tickets. You can either use that QR code, or you can we will email you about it afterwards and you can just click through the link in the email. So do pop along to that. We'd love to see you there on the 27th of November to keep on having this conversation. And finally, I don't think, I'm just going to check there aren't any, I don't think, have we got questions in the chat? Do Kirsten or Sarah do yell out if there's questions in the chat because I can't see it so well now. But just to say thank you very much, everybody, for coming, and thank you massively to our three excellent speakers who have spoken so eloquently tonight about the need for change, but also how this works in practice. It's been really brilliant to have you. Thank you very much. And if you are interested to get involved further in all the activity that's happening in the Empathy Day Festival, we are running until the 12th of June, and everything that we're doing through digital events will be up until the 12th of July on our website. So you can catch up on demand with all of our author events and our webinars. And our next webinar is on Monday. That's about empathy and autism, which is something we get asked about a lot. So if you're interested in that, you'll be able to sign up using that QR code. And of course, if you would like to use our free creative resources, dive into more books, jump into other people's stories, we would love for you to do that. Download the resources, use them at home or in your setting over the next few days as the festival continues. I am going to just say a massive thank you one more time to our wonderful speakers. Thank you, all of you, for coming.
Can I say thank you, Imogen, Kirsten, and others? You're a fantastic organisation doing terrific things. So
Absolutely.
keep it up. Really,
Yeah, thank you.
it's wonderful.
Oh, that's very kind of you, Anthony. Thank you very, very much. It's been brilliant to speak to you and hear more of your thoughts tonight. So thank you very much, everyone. We are 3 minutes over time, but I hope you've enjoyed the evening and